Do you imagine ending up as food for animals? I didn't either, until the day I realized that was exactly what my fate was supposed to be. And this is the story of how I escaped the worst serial killer in Canadian history. Some criminals bury their secrets. Others throw them into the water. But this man did something different. Something no one believed was possible. During the 1990s in Vancouver, something was deeply wrong. Women were disappearing as if the city itself was swallowing them. Nobody spoke about it out loud, but in the downtown east side, we felt it in our skin. Every corner carried rumors. Every night, someone didn't come home. At first, no one seemed to care, because they were sex workers or homeless women. But as the days passed, the number kept growing. A serial killer was walking free, a cold and dangerous man. His name was Robert Pickton. When I began to piece together who Pickton really was, I understood that the monster didn't appear out of nowhere. He grew up isolated, far from the cities, surrounded by mud, animals, and silence, on a pig farm where human life meant less than daily labor. From childhood, he learned to get his hands dirty, to ask no questions, and to obey harsh orders. His world wasn't built on friendship, play, or affection, but on cold routines and loneliness. His mother controlled every aspect of his life. She was strict, humiliating, and domineering. She didn't raise him to connect with people, but to endure, stay quiet, and work. While other children learned how to communicate, he learned how to shut himself off. At school, he was invisible, awkward, uncomfortable. He didn't belong anywhere. He grew up feeling out of place, while quietly collecting something dangerous, silent resentment. Over the years, that isolation never disappeared. It followed him into adulthood. He lived alone in a rusted trailer on the same farm where he had grown up. No partner, no real relationships, no one truly looking at him. On the outside, he seemed like a simple man. On the inside, he was building a twisted reality where control replaced affection and power replaced human connection. That's when everything began to make sense. The isolated child became the adult who learned how to hide. The invisible teenager became the man who wanted to be untouchable. The farm wasn't just his home. It was his fortress, a perfect place to make things disappear. People, lives. While others slept, he built his perfect world. Illegal parties, loud music, drugs. People constantly coming and going. A place where vulnerable women didn't attract attention. A place where disappearing made no noise. I didn't know it then, but he always hunted in the same area. He watched. He chose. He offered money, drugs, a ride. He seemed harmless, even awkward. He didn't raise alarms. The disappearances kept increasing. More than 65 women vanished. Families begged for help. No one listened. Authorities said the girls had left town, that they were lost, that it wasn't worth investigating. And while that was happening, he kept filling his truck and emptying the city. I lived in the downtown east side of Vancouver, a place where surviving was a full-time job. Every day meant improvising, resisting, adapting. That night, I was looking for the same things as always: to stay alive until morning, money to eat, somewhere to sleep. And it was in that state, tired, vulnerable, used to danger, that I accepted the ride. I had no idea the trip wouldn't take me to just another destination, but straight into the heart of a national nightmare. The day I got into his vehicle, I didn't feel immediate fear. He was just another man offering a ride. But when we turned toward the farm, something shifted. The air grew heavy. The silence felt thick. We arrived at an isolated place, surrounded by mud and crooked fences. Pigs screamed in the distance. That's when I understood. He wasn't a client. He wasn't just another stranger. I felt it in my body, the animal instinct that tells you when you're walking into a trap. When we arrived at the farm, I noticed something strange. It didn't feel like a working place. It felt abandoned. The air was hot, heavy, saturated with the smell of animals, rusted metal, and rotting moisture. It wasn't the normal scent of the countryside. It was dirty, thick, like something was slowly decomposing. I immediately noticed the pigs. They were everywhere, large, filthy, packed tightly together. They grunted non-stop, slammed their bodies against the fences, pushed their snouts into the mud searching for food. The sound was constant, aggressive, almost desperate. Inside the trailer, the atmosphere changed instantly. He locked the door, pulled out handcuffs, and tried to grab my wrist. I stepped back and instinctively grabbed a kitchen knife. There was a struggle. I fell to the floor, crashed into furniture, and felt the space closing in around me. I managed to break free and ran out of the farm toward the road, screaming and waving my arms. A car stopped. Someone called emergency services. Minutes later, I was inside an ambulance, surrounded by white lights and frantic voices. Later, I learned something that made my blood run cold. He was also in the hospital that night, in the same building, just meters away from me. They took my statement. He was arrested that same night. For a moment, I believed it was over. But days later, they released him. They said my word wasn't enough, and while I tried to heal, he walked free again. After my escape, at least 24 more women disappeared. 24 chances to stop him. For years, his farm continued operating as a party location. People came and went. Alcohol, drugs, constant movement. That made it even harder to notice who entered and who never left. In 2001, a special task force was created to investigate the missing women, but they still didn't have legal permission to enter his property. Everything changed in early 2002, when a former worker told police that he kept illegal weapons inside his trailer. With that information, authorities obtained a search warrant. On February 5th, 2002, police entered the farm. What started as a weapons search turned into something far bigger. They found belongings from missing women, documents, clothing, jewelry, scattered across the property. In vehicles and structures, they discovered human DNA and biological traces that directly connected the farm to several victims. The scale was so massive that the site had to be completely sealed off and excavated for months. Heavy machinery, forensic teams, and archaeologists were brought in. Tons of soil were removed. Hundreds of thousands of pieces of evidence were collected. Experts concluded that pigs may have been used to help dispose of remains, making it extremely difficult to recover complete evidence. That was one of the reasons why not all victims were ever identified. The farm became the largest crime scene in Canadian history. Later, I learned something else that froze me in place. He didn't just raise pigs. He also transported animal remains to industrial rendering plants, where everything is crushed and boiled down into ingredients that later end up inside processed products people buy at supermarkets, sausages, ham, and other mass-produced meats. It was never proven that human remains entered that system. But investigators admitted something disturbing. Once material entered that industrial process, it became nearly impossible to trace. There was no real way to know exactly what left the farm, and sometimes I think it was better not to know the full truth. When the Robert Pickton case became public, the shock was so intense that the pig farm became national news. There was no official ban on meat consumption, but fear spread fast. Authorities had to publicly reassure citizens that there was no evidence of contamination in consumer products. Still, the psychological damage was already done. In 2007, the court found him guilty of 6 murders and sentenced him to life in prison. On paper, the case was closed. In reality, the consequences remained open. Families without bodies, names without answers, years that will never be returned. The farm was left empty. The pens fell silent. The animals were gone. But the place was never normal again. I was there. I walked out of that place when others couldn't. My name is Heidi, and I survived to tell.